What happens when a kid gets sent to a brainwashing camp by mistake? Welcome to Eagle Camp, a place with the harshest punishments you can imagine, the strictest guards, and even the creepiest doctors. What happens when a group of rebellious troublemakers team up to take down this brutal school? And as always, the ending will shock you. Johnny was never the good kid type. Back at his high school, he was infamous for pulling pranks that drove his teachers up the wall. One day, in the school hallway, Johnny decided to pour essential oil all over the floor, causing the principal to slip and fall right in front of a crowd of students. Johnny stood there cracking up while chatting with his buddy. "Dude, you're so done, Johnny," his friend whispered, looking nervous. "Done? Nah, I'm just getting started. This is hilarious." Johnny smirked, giving a playful wink. "My sister got sent to a camp for bad kids just for little pranks like this. She'd kill to pull off something as epic as me. Yo, you recording this yet?" His friend nodded, pulling out his phone to capture the chaos. But right then, the principal's voice boomed like thunder. "Who's responsible for this mess?" Johnny and his friend tried to bolt, but the principal had already zeroed in on the culprit. "Johnny, do you know I'm allergic to essential oils, or is this just a cruel coincidence?" the principal snapped, his tone sharp. Johnny, unfazed, shrugged with a grin. "Well, guess you got lucky this time, sir. Or should I say super lucky?" The principal wasn't amused. "That's it? You're suspended for a week. This is your 9th write-up this year, young man." Back at home, Johnny's mum, Carla, got the call about his suspension and was beyond disappointed. "You have zero responsibility, Johnny," she scolded. "You don't do your chores, you're failing almost every class, and look at this mess of a room. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Johnny hung his head, putting on his best fake remorseful face. "I know, Mum. I've learned my lesson, and from now on, I'll do the right thing," he said. But the sneaky look in his eyes made Carla suspicious. "Are you being real with me, Johnny? Because if you keep lying, no one will believe you when you're actually telling the truth." In the small, dimly lit living room of their modest home, a faint glow from the lamp cast shadows on Carla's anxious face. She sat on their old worn-out couch, her hands clasped tightly together, letting out a heavy sigh as she vented to her husband, Daniel, who stood leaning against the doorframe, deep in thought. "I've tried everything, Daniel," Carla said, her voice trembling with frustration and helplessness. "I've talked to him gently, I've yelled, I've even taken away his allowance, but Johnny just won't listen. He's getting worse every day, and I honestly don't know what to do anymore." Daniel, his face etched with concern, stepped closer to his wife and pulled a slightly faded folded flyer from his jacket pocket. "I looked into a place," he said, his tone low but tinged with hope. "It's called Eagle Camp, a reform center specifically for troubled teens like Johnny. They claim a 100% success rate, with not a single kid going back to their old ways after their program." Carla looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes mixed with a heavy dose of doubt. "Turn them around. What does that even mean?" she asked, her voice shaky with worry. She took the flyer from Daniel's hand, flipping through its pages, her eyes scanning the bold promises of getting your child back on the right path. The flyer featured pictures of smiling teens playing in the camp's courtyard, but Carla couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her gut. She knew Johnny was a stubborn kid, and the thought of sending her son to some faraway place made her heart ache. Still, the flyer's convincing words and her desperation to get through to Johnny pushed her and Daniel to decide to learn more about this place. The next morning, they set out for Eagle Camp, driving down narrow country roads flanked by dense, shadowy woods, the chilly morning air seeping through the car windows. When they arrived, the sight of the camp sent a chill down their spines. Towering walls surrounded by barbed wire fences made it look more like a prison than a reform center. Dr. Thomas, the head of the camp, greeted them at the gate with a confident smile that felt almost too polished, almost cold. He wore a crisp white lab coat, his hair slicked back perfectly, and his voice was smooth like a seasoned salesman. "Welcome to Eagle Camp," he began, ushering them into a small but spotless office. "Here, we teach kids to follow the rules. Some of our toughest cases, kids who've stolen, run away from home, or defied their parents, have been transformed in just a short time. We have a special method to ensure lasting change." Carla and Daniel sat across from Dr. Thomas, hanging on to his every word. But the air in the room suddenly grew tense when a piercing scream echoed from the hallway outside. A young girl, her hair a tangled mess, was being dragged past the office, by two tall burly men, her wrists gripped tightly, her eyes red and brimming with terror. "Please don't take me, I don't want to go," she screamed, her voice cracking with fear before she was pulled out of sight. Carla flinched, her heart racing, and she turned to Dr. Thomas, her eyes full of suspicion. But he merely smiled, his tone calm and dismissive, as if nothing had happened. "No need to worry," he reassured them, raising a hand to wave off their concerns. "That girl is making excellent progress. She used to be one of our toughest cases, but she's come a long way. In just one more month, I guarantee she'll be completely free of her delinquent behavior. We know exactly what we're doing here." A week after his suspension, the atmosphere in Johnny's small family home grew more tense than ever. Johnny showed no signs of remorse for his behavior. In fact, he doubled down on his defiance. For the entire week, he did nothing but camp. Out in the living room, sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, eyes glued to the TV screen as he played endless rounds of video games filled with the sounds of gunfire and shouting. The mess he left behind was a disaster. Empty chip bags, soda cans, and a cold, half-eaten pizza box littered the floor, turning the living room into a chaotic dump that reeked of stale food and trash. Crumbs were scattered across the couch, and sticky soda stains soaked into the rug Carla had painstakingly cleaned the week before, but Johnny didn't care one bit. Every time Carla came in, trying to clean up and scold him. "Johnny, you need to clean this mess up right now. You can't live like this." He'd just shoot her an annoyed glare, then deliberately crank up the music on his Bluetooth speaker to max volume. The blaring rap beats echoed through the house, drowning out her voice entirely. As if that wasn't enough, Johnny slapped on his headphones, pretending he couldn't hear a thing, and went right back to gaming, his shoulders bobbing to the music, as if he was daring his mom to keep pushing him. Carla felt like her heart was being crushed by her son's blatant disrespect. She stood there, clutching a mop, staring at the mess Johnny had made, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. A wave of helplessness and frustration washed over her as she turned to Daniel, who had just come home from work and witnessed the whole scene, her eyes filled with pain. "I can't take it anymore, Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, barely holding back sobs. "I can't keep doing this. He's not just ignoring me, he's making everything worse on purpose. If we don't do something now, Johnny's never going to change, and I'm terrified he's going to ruin his whole future." Daniel, though equally heartbroken, nodded. In agreement, knowing they'd reached their breaking point. He immediately called Eagle Camp, his voice firm but heavy with the weight of the decision. That night, as darkness fell and a faint moonlight filtered through the windows, two tall, imposing men from Eagle Camp showed up at their door. Dressed in black uniforms, their faces cold and expressionless, they didn't waste a single word, stepping inside and grabbing Johnny, who finally dropped his controller in a panic. "Mom, Dad, help me, who are these guys? Don't let them take me," Johnny shouted, his voice frantic as he thrashed in the strong grip of the two men. But Carla, though her heart felt like it was shattering, stood frozen, her fists clenched, tight, tears rolling down her face. "I'm sorry, Johnny," she choked out, her voice breaking, "but this is for your own good. I can't let you keep going down this path." Daniel placed a comforting hand on his wife's shoulder, trying to ease her pain, as Johnny was dragged out of the house, his cries growing fainter until they faded into the stillness of the night. Johnny was taken to Eagle Camp and locked in a tiny room that looked more like a jail cell than a bedroom. The next morning, while sweeping the courtyard with the other teens, he met David Monson, another kid sent to the camp. "Where are we?" Johnny asked, looking around at the grim surroundings. "It's a camp for troubled kids," David replied. "This place is a nightmare, but the real nightmare is behind that door." A towering guard interrupted them. "No talking. You two just earned yourselves extra cleaning duty." Johnny whispered to David, "This is the worst camp ever. We've got to get out of here." David shook his head. "There's no way out. Break the rules and it only gets worse." But Johnny wasn't one to give up. He demanded to speak to the manager, mouthing off to the guard, which landed him in Dr. Thomas's office. "You've got spirit, Johnny," Dr. Thomas said with a chilling smile, but we don't tolerate disobedience here. We use the latest experimental technology to control delinquent behavior." "Experimental?" Johnny yelled. "I want to go home." Dr. Thomas's smile turned sinister. "This is your first strike. By your third, you'll see what happens." At lunch, Johnny sat next to Jennifer, the girl he'd seen being dragged away earlier. While they were eating, 2 guards stormed in and grabbed her. "That's your third strike," one of them barked. Jennifer screamed, "Don't take me to that room." Johnny turned to David, his eyes wide. "What's in that room? When they come out, they're like totally different people. We've got to figure this out." Back at home, Carla was growing anxious and called the camp, but no one picked up. Daniel tried to reassure her. "They sent us pictures. Johnny's doing great and making progress." But Carla couldn't shake her uneasy feeling. At the camp, Johnny hatched a plan. He stole some soda and vinegar from the cafeteria, mixed them together, and spilled the concoction on the floor. When a guard bent down to inspect the mess, Johnny swiftly swiped his keys. "What is this?" the guard growled. "I'm just the janitor, sir," Johnny said, faking a scared tone. "I'll clean it up, I swear." As the sun set, darkness crept over Eagle Camp, casting an eerie fog over the cold grey buildings. Johnny and David, hearts pounding, snuck down a shadowy hallway toward the central room, a place strictly off-limits to the camp's teens. The heavy iron door, rusted and scratched, loomed like a warning. Johnny glanced at David, his eyes a mix of determination and fear. "You sure about this?" David whispered, his voice trembling. Johnny nodded, gripping the stolen keys tightly. The sound of the key turning in the lock echoed like a drumbeat in the silent hall. The door creaked open, revealing a pitch-black room lit only by the sickly green glow of ancient computer monitors on the wall. The air was icy, reeking of disinfectant, and metal, making both boys shiver. Tall metal filing cabinets lined the room, looking like tombs holding the camp's darkest secrets. Johnny stepped inside first, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the tiled floor. "Hurry before they catch us," he hissed, his voice tight with tension. David, though scared, followed, his shaky hands pulling open the first drawer. Thick files, spilled out, packed with scribbled notes in black ink and black and white photos of teens, their faces blank, eyes hollow. Johnny flipped through a file, his heart stopping when he saw his own name, Jonathan Carter. Inside were dozens of photos of him, smiling, standing in the courtyard, even sleeping. But he swore he'd never posed for any of them. "What the heck is this?" Johnny muttered, his voice trembling with anger and confusion. "They faked all of this. They sent these to my parents to make them think I'm okay." David, rummaging through another drawer, froze, his face pale. "Johnny, look at this," he whispered, holding up a report. The messy handwritten notes read, "Subject, Jonathan Carter. Progress, preparing for Phase 1 brainwashing. Expected outcome, full compliance within 30 days. Johnny's blood boiled, his hands crumpling the paper in rage. "Brainwashing," he growled, his eyes blazing. "They're not just locking us up, they're turning us into puppets." Suddenly, they heard a noise. Through a small window, they saw Jennifer strapped to a chair, a nurse speaking to Dr. Thomas. "One more shock and she's done." Jennifer screamed, but after a jolt of electricity, she woke up smiling like a robot. "I feel wonderful, doctor." Johnny and David were horrified and bolted out of the room, but their noise caught Dr. Thomas's attention. He stepped out to check and noticed Johnny's file cabinet was open and in disarray. Staring at Johnny's photo, he grinned wickedly. "Next case." The next morning, Johnny tried to convince David. "We've got to tell our parents." But David was terrified. "I don't want to end up a zombie." They greeted Jennifer, but she just repeated, "I'm doing great, thanks for asking." Johnny pressed her, but she remembered nothing. 2 guards stormed in, dragging Johnny to Dr. Thomas's office for breaking the no-talking rule. Alone in the room, Johnny spotted a phone on the desk and grabbed it, dialing his mom. "Mom, this camp is brainwashing kids. You have to get me out of here," he shouted. But Carla didn't believe him. "You're lying again, Johnny. We've seen the photos and reports. They say you're doing fine. Just do what they tell you," she said. The call cut off as Dr. Thomas stormed in, his face dark with anger. "That's your third strike," he growled. Later, Carla went grocery. shopping and ran into Angie, Kimberly's mum. Angie shared that Kimberly had just returned from Eagle Camp, now a completely changed person, obedient and polite. Carla smiled and greeted Kimberly, who replied with a forced smile, "I'm doing great, thanks for asking." Angie laughed. "It's like they brainwashed her or something." Carla's stomach dropped, a bad feeling creeping in. She decided to head home and convinced Daniel to drive to Eagle Camp to check on Johnny. At the camp, Johnny was strapped to a treatment chair. Dr. Thomas sneered, "Juvenile delinquency is a disease and my machine is the cure. Just a few more test subjects, and we'll expand this program nationwide. Money will come pouring into my pockets." Meanwhile, Carla and Daniel arrived at the camp, demanding to see Johnny. Through a security camera in the lab, Johnny saw his parents arrive and screamed with all his might, hoping they'd hear him, but it was no use. A guard stopped Carla and Daniel in the lobby, saying, "He's in an important therapy session right now." The guard then got a call and stepped away. Feeling anxious, Carla and Daniel slipped into the inner area of the camp, stumbling into the dorms, which looked more like a prison than the nice rooms shown in the brochure. At that moment, in the dorms, David took advantage of a distracted guard, delivering a swift kick to the man's groin, making him double over in pain. Without hesitating, David slammed the guard's head against the iron bars of a cell, knocking him out cold. David snatched the guard's keys and stun baton, then sprinted toward the lab. Bursting into the lab, David caught Dr. Thomas off guard, jabbing the stun baton into his back. The electric shock made Thomas collapse to his knees, writhing in pain. Still, Thomas managed to crawl toward the control panel, hitting the alarm button before passing out. The piercing siren echoed through Eagle Camp. Throwing the whole place into chaos, David quickly untied Johnny, pulling him off the chair. Coming to his senses, Johnny grabbed a cup of water from the table and dumped it onto the experimental machine. Sparks flew as the machine short-circuited, smoke billowing out as it shut down for good. With no time to waste, Johnny and David dashed out of the lab, dodging the two guards who were charging toward the source of the alarm. Luckily, as they ran through the dorm area, they spotted Carla and Daniel, who were frantically looking around. "Mom! Dad!" Johnny yelled. The group bolted for the car, piling in and speeding off. Dr. Thomas, now regaining consciousness despite his injuries, staggered after them, pulling out a gun and firing from a distance. But the bullet missed by a mile. Carla immediately called the police. 2 hours later, the cops reported they'd caught Thomas trying to flee the area. Eagle Camp was shut down for good and put under a full investigation. After the nightmare at Eagle Camp, Johnny came home a completely changed person. Gone was the reckless, irresponsible kid he used to be. Now, Johnny was a mature young man who kept his promises and lived honestly. He started helping his mom with chores, cleaned up his messy room, and even buckled down on his schoolwork to boost his grades. Carla and Daniel, his parents, couldn't hide their joy seeing this incredible transformation. Their eyes sparkled with pride every time they looked at their son. One cool fall evening, warm golden light glowed from the windows of Johnny's small family home. He decided to throw a little party to thank the friends who'd survived the Eagle Camp ordeal with him. Johnny carefully prepared, popping popcorn and sprinkling it with salt and melted butter, filling the kitchen with a mouth-watering aroma. He invited David, Jennifer, and a few other close friends over. As soon as they walked in, the house filled with laughter and chatter, erasing the tension they'd all once felt. David, still a bit shy from their time at the camp, cracked a genuine smile when he saw Johnny in a butter-stained apron. Jennifer, now back to her lively self, gave Johnny a big hug, thanking him for saving her from Dr. Thomas's brainwashing machine. They all gathered in the living room, sprawling on the worn but cozy couches. Johnny, whose sense of humor never faded, started messing with everyone. He mimicked Dr. Thomas's voice, saying, "All right, kids, who's ready for strike 3?" The whole group burst into laughter, nearly falling off their seats. Jennifer, giggling, playfully tossed a handful of popcorn at Johnny, yelling, "Don't you dare bring that creep up again or I'm coming for you." The laughter echoed through the house, pure and carefree, as if the dark days at Eagle Camp were just a distant dream. Carla and Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching the kids with happy smiles. Carla squeezed her husband's hand, whispering, "I never thought he'd change this much." Daniel nodded, his eyes shining with joy, and replied, "He did it and so did we.